going to just give you a quick introduction of who we are, you know, the University of Notre Dame, Australia, and where our campuses are here in Australia. And then I will obviously let the Dean of Law, Michael and Joan, to, you know, tell you more about our master's degrees and the degrees by research. So Notre Dame has, as you can see here in this slide, has achieved the following rankings in the federal government Quilt survey. So we were considered #1 in Australia for learner engagement, #1 as well for skills development, student support, and teaching quality. And the reason why we were considered this way is because we truly provide pastoral care for our students. So we have created a small community, and we're proud to say that. Now, you will see later in the presentation, but for this particular master's degree, you can actually study either in Sydney or Fremantle, so New South Wales or Western Australia. But it can also have an online component. So we will discuss this later through the presentation. Obviously, you can learn from experts because all of our academics, they have a lot of experience in their area, in this case in the legal field. And obviously there's progress to research degrees. And like I was mentioning before, you're going to be treated like a person and not just a number. So our the application process is directly with the University of Notre Dame through our website, which I'm going to tell you more about it by the end of the presentation. So just a quick chat about where we are. So basically we're located at our campus in Sydney is in Broadway. So it's Chippendale, that's the suburb, and it's accessible through public transportation or train. It's a very short walk from Central, and there's so many things around there. So we have basically the university hub right there, and we have Broadway Shopping Centre, we have cafes, Central Park Mall, the CBD is really close as well. In Fremantle, as you can see on the slide, it's very close as well to the beach. It's basically 3 minutes away from it. So it's 30 minutes away from the CBD. And same thing, you have cafes and shops around, you have the Esplanade, and you can access this campus by public transportation as well. So let's get started. Again, Professor Michael Quinlan, who has joined us tonight, he is the Dean of the School of Law here in Sydney, and he has over 23 years of experience in different areas. So he's obviously been practicing commercial litigation, and he has specialized in insurance law, amongst other things. He has been a long-time member of Allen's Pro Bono Committee, and obviously he is a firm believer of, you know, law and religion, as you can see there. We also have here Joan Squelch, who has joined us tonight. And as you can see as well, Professor Joan, she has joined Notre Dame in 2013. And before that, she was lecturing as well in the School of Business Law and Taxation at Curtin University. So she has been, she's had other roles as well as Pro Vice Chancellor, and she honestly has enjoyed her teaching career as well as Professor Michael. She has been teaching in South Africa and Botswana as well as in Australia. So they will tell you more about our academic staff in both campuses. So thank you again. And now it's this presentation is all yours, Professor Michael and Professor Joan. Thank you.
Well, welcome everyone. It's very nice to meet you all virtually. I just want to talk a bit, we just want to talk a little bit about some of the academics who teach into our programs. So I'm going to talk about some of the Sydney people, and Dr. Squelch will talk about some of the Fremantle people. So the people I talk about in Sydney teach into the Masters of Law coursework program, but they also supervise higher degrees by research. So Professor Ian Benson is a very cosmopolitan person. He was born in Scotland, has lived most of his life in Canada, and when he's not in Sydney, he's at his farmhouse in the south of France. He was a leading advocate in Canada before he became an academic. So he entered the academy later in life. He's a very dynamic person, very interested in jurisprudence, legal theory, law and religion, bioethics. They're his main areas. Dr. Keith Thompson is a New Zealander by birth. He has a very interesting career. He was general counsel for a church for more than 20 years, working in the Asia Pacific and in Africa. He also continues to practice law, as well as being heavily involved in the supervision of research. On the next slide, you can see a couple of our other academics who teach into the program. Dr. Peter Williams, who after a long career at the University of New South Wales, saw the light and came over to Notre Dame. He has many years of experience giving advice in relation to environmental law, and he supervises and teaches in relation to environmental law, Indigenous law, and property law. And Dr. Greg Walsh has been with Notre Dame for many years, having taught in many other law schools before joining us. His main areas are in health law, law and religion, and bioethics. Now I think Joan's going to talk about some of the academics in her school.
Yeah, good evening, everyone. Thank you. It's lovely to be joining the virtual session today. So I'm going to be introducing you to a couple of staff at the Fremantle campus. Professor Phil Evans is a West Australian and has extensive experience and expertise in construction law and arbitration. Professor Evans was in fact a civil engineer before he entered the legal profession, and he continues to teach and practice in mainly in the area of construction law and arbitration. And my next colleague, Ms. Chanel van der Westhuizen, recently arrived in Australia from South Africa, another South African. She qualified in South Africa in law and was admitted as a barrister. Since joining Notre Dame, she continues to teach and specialize in areas of banking law and consumer law. Chanel did a fascinating, she has a master's of law by Coursework, but she also completed a fascinating master's by research, which we'll talk about later on, in the area of banking law, in particular cryptocurrency and the legal status of Bitcoin. So cutting edge research. And Chanel is currently undertaking, she's almost finished her PhD, her Doctor of Philosophy, also in the area of banking law. So she brings an interesting area of international expertise and experience. And Dr. Laura Pratt is a Sydney-sider and studied at Macquarie Law School. Her area of interest, her teaching interests and research interests are in international public law, in particular humanitarian law, refugee law, and human rights law. And Laura supervises PhD students and master students and assists with running the Red Cross Moot. And we can talk more about moots later on if you're interested.
Thanks, Joan. We might introduce you a bit to the Master of Laws by Coursework. I think this is a really exciting program. And one of the most exciting things about it is that it's possible to do the whole program. So it's a one-year program with 8 subjects. It's possible to do the whole program in Sydney, online or in person. In person, once we're allowed to come back to campus, which will probably not be until next year, but online otherwise. It's also possible to do half of your studies, the first half of your studies in Sydney and the second half of your studies at the Institut Catholique de Paris in Paris, France, again, subject to travel restrictions. So this program is a great way to expand your legal knowledge and skills and to differentiate yourself from other law graduates and lawyers. It has an international law focus, and that's a particularly important focus given the globalization of the legal profession. And on this slide here, you can see some photographs of the Institut Catholique de Paris, or the Catholic University of Paris, to give it its English name, which I had the pleasure of visiting last year. And we will be welcoming students from ICP, Institut Catholique de Paris, to study with us in Sydney when the borders are open again. So as I mentioned, it's a one-year program with the opportunity to study online at the moment, and once it's possible, in person in Sydney, and for the second half of the course, if you wish to, it's possible to study that at the ICP. So this is the basic structure of the program. So 4 subjects a semester if you're studying full-time. There's a research component to the program. So research methods is the course which helps you to develop your legal researching skills, and that translates into a thesis, which is something you complete in second semester. We have one compulsory course in ethics, ethical issues in professional life, but the rest of the course is chosen by you from our elective options, which you can see some of on our next PowerPoint. So international environmental law, the legal environment of the Asia Pacific region, philosophy, international law, international human rights law, international perspectives on bioethics and the law and religion, canon law. So they're just some of the options which are available to students who study the coursework program. So in order to enter the program, there are some prerequisites. So essentially you have to have completed a Bachelor of Laws in Australia or international equivalent with honours, or at a high credit level, or completed the Bachelor of Laws and then the Graduate Diploma in Legal Practice, or the Practical Legal Training Program, or a Bachelor of Laws combined with relevant practical experience as a lawyer primarily, or a Juris Doctor or their international equivalents. So that gives you the criteria for applying to enter the program. So I think Jackie's now going to take over a bit and talk to you about the application process itself.
Thank you, Michael. Correct. So for this particular program, guys, as you can see in that slide, there's 3 basic steps. Other than what Michael already mentioned, the basic steps are these ones that you can see. So you need to submit your application, including your academic transcripts, just to make sure that you do have, you know, the bachelor degree in law or what we just mentioned before. We need to see the transcripts, and then of course. The admissions department, normally they take 4 to 6 weeks to give you an outcome. And this is because, again, we take a holistic approach to admissions. So we don't just look at your academic transcripts. We also want to get to know you as a person. So what are your interests, why you chose Notre Dame, etc. We used to have an interview before, but this has been streamlined after COVID-19. We still want to know who you are. So that's why it is important that you submit any other documents that you consider that are relevant, such as your resume or perhaps reference letters or anything that you think will be relevant to your application. And finally, you would just receive the outcome from us. This could be obviously a letter of offer to study the Master of Laws by course. Otherwise, our admissions might require you to give us additional documents before we can make a decision. Thank you. Now, I will ask Professor Joan, please, if she can continue with our by research. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So in addition to being able to study a Master of Laws by coursework, prospective students can also choose to undertake a research project and study a Master of Laws by research, or if you already have a master's degree, a PhD by research, a Doctor of Philosophy. And in terms of undertaking research, this involves a very thorough, in-depth, comprehensive, systematic study or investigation into a particular area of law and topic of law. So the application process is slightly different in that before you even come to the application stage and enrollment stage, it is essential to at least have an idea of the area of law you would like to research, and more specifically a topic, and then to discuss that with one of the academic members of staff. And that member of staff, they won't necessarily end up being your supervisor, but they will provide you with that initial guidance and input in terms of progressing your research idea, writing your research proposal, and preparing that research proposal for your application to enroll in a Master's of Law by Research or a PhD. So if we go to the next slide, we can see then the kinds of areas of law that prospective students might choose to study. Now, these might be areas of law in which a prospective student is currently practicing in or has an interest in furthering their expertise, their knowledge, their skills for professional development purposes, but and career opportunities. It's of course also for those who are wishing to enter academia, to teach in universities, in a law school, will at the very least have to have a master's degree and then eventually a PhD, a Doctor of Philosophy. So someone wanting to come and teach in a law school would continue to research in an area of law of their interest, and specifically in which they intend teaching. So I teach in, for example, constitutional law and legal history and education law, and Michael certainly teaches in the area of corporate law and corporate and solvency and so on. So here are some additional areas, but also some very specific topics that students can study. So I'm, for example, currently supervising 4 PhD students and assisting 2 of my colleagues with their PhDs as well. So for example, one of my students in education law is looking at the decision-making role of school principals in the area of administrative law and the knowledge and skills they need in order to exercise lawful administrative decisions and actions. So that's just one example. We can perhaps, we can come back in your questions to look at other examples if you so wish. So if we go to the next slide. So the Masters of Laws by Research is, as you can see, a 2-year full-time program or part-time equivalent. So you can appreciate that over a period of 2 years, this undertaking a research project does require a great deal of time and commitment, and above all, in the end, perseverance. And during this period in which you are writing a thesis, because at the end of the research project, the research candidate produces a thesis. So that has a particular structure and format. For a master's, it's in the region of 60 to 70,000 words. So you can see that gives an indication of how in-depth it is. In order to guide you through that project and to supervise you over the 2-year period, a student is assigned 2 supervisors. That will always be an internal supervisor within the law school, and the second supervisor might be external to the university. They might be located at a different university, in another law school. They might even be situated in another country. So the idea is that the 2 supervisors provide the necessary research, writing, expertise or the guidance the student needs in order to undertake that project. You'll see we also get input from judges and senior barristers and senior solicitors. For example, a couple of years ago, one of my PhD students, her thesis received a great deal of input from one of the retired Supreme Court judges in Western Australia. So we really do reach out to the experts to give input into our students' research projects. So that I think we've covered that. One of the important things about undertaking research is it is about not only expanding your own knowledge and expertise and developing a much broader, deeper understanding of the area of law and the topic you are wishing to study or are studying, but it's also to make a contribution to the body of law that exists. Now, whilst that might not be so important for a master's degree, it is certainly very important for a doctoral degree, that contribution to the existing body of knowledge. So in terms of the entry requirements, you really do require a Bachelor of Laws degree or the equivalent, preferably with honours, but certainly we would look at applicants with law degrees that have very good results. Now, if someone is wanting to do, if a prospective student wants to do a Master of Laws and does not have a law degree, it is still possible to gain admission. We would prefer you then to first do perhaps a 1-year master's by coursework, but we would certainly, if a person really wanted to do a Master of Laws and did not have an undergraduate law degree, they would maybe required to do 3 or 4 law courses, introductory courses, in order to get the grounding in order to be able to do a master's by research. But we would certainly direct students to do some coursework, preferably the 1-year coursework, before they do the master's by research. I've already mentioned that at the end of the research, the end product is a thesis. This is a very comprehensive, structured document. And as I said, it's 60 to 70,000 words in length. It has a particular format, and this is why your supervisors play an important role in helping you write this document, this manuscript. It is, in terms of the examination process, it's worth mentioning that this thesis is then submitted, whether it's a master's thesis or a doctoral thesis, is submitted to 2 or 3 external examiners, and they are people who have special expertise in the area, who will examine the thesis. Now, a doctoral thesis, I think if we go back to that one, Jackie. The doctoral thesis, to be admitted to the PhD, you would have to have a master's degree. In highly exceptional circumstances, someone with an honor, a Bachelor of Laws honors, with perhaps extensive work experience, might be admitted directly to a PhD, but those are more the exceptional circumstances. So the Doctor of Philosophy is, of course, a much more comprehensive research project. That's 80 to 100,000 word thesis, and that's a much more in-depth examination of the research topic. that is going to take full-time 3 years, but usually one is looking at a 4 to 5 year project. And one of the main requirements for a doctoral philosophy thesis research project is that it does make a contribution to the existing body of knowledge. And as with the master's by research, the candidate is supervised by at least 2 supervisors, so who provide that ongoing support, mentoring, and helping the researcher develop their research skills along the way. So I think that's all that I need to say, because I'm sure we could take some questions.
So does anyone have a question? I still see Abaid. He's still connected. If you guys want to unmute yourselves and ask a question, please go ahead. Anyone?
Yes, I did see in the chat room a question about UK qualifying law degree. Yes, we certainly do recognize and accept applicants from other jurisdictions. And in fact, applicants from other jurisdictions often bring an interesting, especially, well, to their coursework, but certainly to a research project, they might bring an interesting perspective to that research project. And they often are interested in doing comparative law type projects to compare law in different jurisdictions.
If you're there, Abaid, not too sure how to pronounce your name. If you want to go ahead and ask any other question, please feel free. I believe they might be a little bit shy, but they did ask that, and they asked something else in the chat box.
Yes, you're welcome to post to write more questions.
How do I engage the university, he said. So by research and have 2.2 in my law degree, please tell me, how do I engage the university? Professor Michael or Professor John, think you want to answer his question?
Well, yes, the students who are interested in Masters by Research can contact the University Research Office, or they can email the law school directly, and all our details and information are on the university website. I'm afraid I'm not sure of the research office email off by heart, but certainly it's there. Well, there's you can contact. There are the emails that you can contact, but all of the contact details are on the university website. Both the research office and the law school in Sydney campus, and the law school at the Fremantle.
Thank you, Professor John. Yep. So Abaid, you can email us on studyonline@nd.edu.au, and we will direct you to the right person, like Professor John said. You can see there our contact details for Fremantle, Sydney, and this is the generic email, obviously, or same thing via our online community. So LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, or YouTube. I did want to say as well, this is something that Dr. John did mention. So the application process for the research higher degrees is a little bit different to the coursework application. So this is what you would need to do. Just for a recap, you will need to find a collaborator or supervisor through the Notre Dame University Experts Directory. And this is where the prospective students office, like myself, so I do work in the prospective students office in Sydney. We can direct you to these experts, and obviously with the endorsement of a supervisor, you can do then your application online. But we do need to consider for that your transcripts, any past research projects and involvement, and obviously the initial research proposal, evidence of contact with prospective supervisor, and English proficiency if you're an international student. So those are the main the main requirements. As you can see here, for Fremantle, you can email research@nd.edu.au or sydney.research@nd.edu.au. These two would be the main contacts for the research office.